everybody, this is Maiko from Nexus Motion. Welcome back to the Way of Movement Professionals, where I get to sit down with physical therapists and through our question and answers, I get to find what makes them world class. I am sitting right next to Dr. Irene Davis. This has been such an exciting weekend, Irene. Thank you for busting all those myths about
it was a lot of fun
running. That was great get together. But I'll just introduce you guys to those few who don't know Dr. Irene Davis. She's the director of Spaulding National Running Center, which is affiliated with Harvard Medical School, and she's also the visiting professor of physical medicine and rehab at Harvard Medical School. She received her physical therapy degree from University of Florida, and then went on to get her PhD from Pennsylvania State University in biomechanics. So, and she's been treating runners and has been focusing her research on running mechanics and injuries for the past 25 years, or maybe more so now. And her research is funded by the National Institute of Health and also the Department of Defense. So, Irene, thank you so much for being here. I first heard you speak back in 2013 at the Research Symposium of the Science of Running in Los Angeles, alongside Chris Powers and Brian Heiderscheid and Nancy Bill, and I was super impressed with Irene's ability to just make so many great points, and she's just rattling off data after data. Oh, this article by this year written by so and so, with all and just advocating for the type of running that you've been researching, and especially enjoyed listening to your discussions with Chris Powers, or maybe banter.
Yes, no, they were healthy debates.
It's great
because we love each other.
I love seeing that. Yeah. So I will just get right into it.
Okay.
Could you share with us, why did you choose to become a physical therapist? I mean, from your
early days, maybe. Yeah.
You look like you have like a couple bachelor's degrees there.
I do. So I started out really wanting to be an FBI agent. And I sent a letter to J. Edgar Hoover, who told me that women weren't allowed in the FBI. And so I loved figuring things out. Like, I used to love the investigator shows, and I still do. And so I had this I think I always had that sort of inquisitive sort of nature. But I decided to go and start in exercise science. I really did not know what I wanted to do. My dreams were crashed at that point. So I started in exercise science because I always liked exercise and was pretty active. And then I really wanted to apply it to something that was going to be related to more of the, helping people, that reward that you get back. It's not enough to just understand exercise, but how does it apply to the body, and how can we help people reach their optimum potential? So that's kind of what led me to physical therapy school. So at the time, I went to a program that actually had an accelerated program in physical therapy. So it was not a second, it was a second bachelor. So they didn't have the master's program at the time. And that's really why I have two bachelors, is exercise science. Okay. Then I went to PT, and I did a second bachelor's in 15 months, which they don't even have that program anymore. I know, it was very quick. Yeah.
That's pretty intense. So now, once you became a physical therapist, did you go straight from finishing your bachelor's in PT onto master's PhD in biomechanics, or did you spend some time treating patients?
I spent time treating patients, and I think it's really a great way to go, because I think it helps you to figure out what gets you excited. So I started out it was one of my affiliations at Woodrow Wilson Rehab Center, which may seem strange to people because a lot of what I do now is orthopedics, but this was spinal cord rehab and traumatic brain injury and amputations, those kinds of things. But what fascinated me in this job was how someone who has a C5 injury, so they've lost maybe 3/4 of their muscle power, they have a quarter of their muscle power, and they have to move their bodies in very strategic biomechanical ways. And that whole idea of how you use your mechanics really fascinated me. And that's really what got me thinking about doing a master's. I wasn't really sure where it would end up, but I kind of always thought that I'd go on to graduate school. Just because I always had that I want to figure things out thing. And so I did my master's at UVA after working for 3 years. So I practiced for 3 years.
Okay.
And during my master's, I still practiced. I did more like home health, and I just always had my hands in it. Finished my master's at UVA, and at that time I was doing work in biomechanics, but not a clinical aspect of it. I was looking at my master's degree of all things was jumping, but I was in a lab with someone who was doing wheelchair propulsion, so there was a clinical component in that regard. But I wanted to do my PhD with someone that was really well versed in lower extremity mechanics, and I came across Penn State's program and Peter Kavanaugh. And
that's your mentor.
He's my mentor, and he was the guru in running mechanics. And I think, when I bring students in, I like to bring students in that are going to add something to my lab. And what I think I help to bring into that lab is the clinical aspect of things. And so it allowed me to use my physical therapy, but also understand it from the scientific perspective of biomechanics. And so it was like a perfect space for me to have one foot in the clinical world and one foot in the biomechanics world.
That's a perfect mesh. While you were getting your PhD, were you the only physical therapist around, or are they all bioengineers, or like sort of what was the background within that?
It was a mix. It was a mix. So Dr. Mary Rogers, I don't know if you've heard of her, but she was finishing up her PhD when I came in. She's a PT. But my other sort of peers were either in, one was a math major, one was an engineering major. So they kind of came from a number of different areas. So at the time that I was there, the majority of the time I was only the only physical therapist.
Okay, I see. So it sounds like based on you going to Penn State and Peter Kavanaugh being your mentor, he's the one who really kind of guided you into the running research. Is that how you got started with the whole running career?
It really is. And, I love the idea of lower extremity mechanics. It just had a real interest and fascination in it. And so running is just a great model to use. I'm interested in gait in general, walking gait, running gait, but running often is the threshold where people start to get injured because the loads are higher and there's greater demand. So a lot of things that you see in someone walking may not really become a problem until they start running. So it was kind of a nice model to study, but really it was him, and I learned a lot from him. It was a great way to grow up in the field.
Now, did you personally go through any running injuries yourself?
I did. It's interesting. When I was at University of Florida, where I got my PT degree, I was running probably 25 miles a week. I was running like 5 days a week, and started to have, I don't really even remember the problem I had. It might have been a hip problem because I ended up having some hip problems later. But I stopped running. And I didn't run through most of my career, honestly. I did a lot of other things. I did inline skating. I loved to inline skate. Did a 86-mile inline skate race. It's like the pinnacle of inline skating. It's skating from Athens to Atlanta, Georgia. So was doing those kinds of things. But I thought to myself at one point, and this is kind of when Born to Run came out, I was thinking, I've been studying running, and I treat runners, and I'm not running. And I do think it's one of our most natural exercises. So I started to run, and Chris McDougall had come to our lab, which is kind of how we got involved in the Born to Run book. But I was talking to him, and I said, look, I think I want to start, and maybe I should just start barefoot. Maybe I should start with those funny toe shoes. And he said to me, you know what? Just go barefoot. Try barefoot to start because you'll get all the sensory input you need. And I said, well, I paint my toes. I don't want to get calluses. You know what I mean? I'm a girl. And he said, you know what, Irene, the world is your pumice stone, and you will have, he showed me his feet. So I decided to start running barefoot. And so it's really then, it was probably 2008 or 9 that I actually started running, maybe 8, that I started running again. And I started to run barefoot. And then, of course, Delaware is cold. So I was there at the University of Delaware at the time. And so I had to wear shoes. And that's kind of how it got started.
Wow. I have some other questions about the barefoot stuff, but we'll save that for later because you had mentioned Delaware. So before you took your position at Spaulding National Running Center, you were a professor at University of Delaware, Department of Physical Therapy.
I was.
And can you share with me some of your favorite memories while at Delaware?
Yeah, I think some of my favorite times was being in the clinic with my students, so the DPT students, because we could translate what we learned in the classroom. That was for me, the favorite classroom was being in the clinic. So I think that was part of it. I had a colleague, John Schultz, who it was just my favorite. I mean, we were really close. We had offices side by side for 20 years, and we used to have office time where we'd get together and we'd share personal challenges, professional challenges, victories, that kind of thing. He was just such a big part of Delaware for me, and he passed away a few years back. I know. But it's just a happy memory I have there. And I think the other really happy memories I have was just sitting and brainstorming with my PhD students about research. Like, it's almost the brainstorming part I like the best. I mean, once you get that down, it's a matter of mechanically going through what you've set up, but it's the brainstorming part that I like. So I think those, and I still like that, even where I am now.
Yes.
That's fun.
And I think we've just had a huge brainstorming session for the last 3 days.
We have.
Here.
It's why I love coming to this meeting, because it really is fun like that.
Yeah. So we've just been lucky. We've been part of coming to the retreat just outside of St. Louis, organized by Dr. Shirley Sarman, and I've gotten to become seatmates with Irene. Taking notes alongside, but it's just a wonderful mix of clinicians, researchers, and educators to talk about what needs to happen to move the profession forward. So.
And everybody leaves their ego at the door. There's none of that. You know, it's just a real open sharing of ideas.
Yeah. Now, when did the Spaulding National Running Center open up, and how did you become the director?
That's a really interesting question. So I had gotten to the point at Delaware where I was a full professor. I had kind of met the goals that I had, and I had done some research that in terms of the gait retraining and motor learning and you know, really changing movement patterns. And I wanted to take that and translate that into a clinical setting. And sometimes you have to go someplace else to kind of really do a brand, because I really wanted it to be something that was in full-blown, you know, really seeing a lot of runners and being able to do that at a large scale. And I couldn't do it where I was. My parents were getting older. I lost my parents the last couple of years. This happens, you know, but I wanted to be there when they were getting older. I love Boston. It was always my home. I grew up not far from Boston.
Okay.
And so there were a lot of things that were pulling me that way.
I see.
So I actually thought to myself, if you could do anything that you wanted to do, I didn't want to get back into another faculty position. Not that I didn't love it, but that I wanted to do another chapter. Right. So I thought, well, what would that be? And so I really thought about that hard, and I thought it would be really nice to have a center that has a clinical component. Because again, even at Delaware, I remained clinically active. I've never stopped being clinically active. So I wanted to have a clinical component and a research component, and I wanted they're co-located. I wanted to be able to have the clinic generate the research questions and the research to inform clinical practice. And we do that. I mean, there are things we find out that we implement the next week. So that's really what I was looking for. So I went to Boston kind of looking for a home and started just talking to different people, different universities. And before you know it, I was sitting in a room along a big conference table with the chair of physical medicine and rehabilitation at Harvard Medical School. Someone said, I think you should talk to this guy. And it just happened. I think it was really a lot of the stars aligning, that they were looking to increase sports medicine. They had just bought some space, or they were about to buy some space. So there were just a lot of things that sort of kind of came together. And it took a couple of years from that point, but eventually we got the space and they hired me on. So it was really something that we created together. It wasn't a job that I interviewed for.
I see.
So I was the founding director.
Yes.
And I came in 2011. The beginning of 2011, and by the spring of 2012 we had built out the lab and the clinic. We'd started the clinic, and we were starting to get the lab, you know, all of the equipment and all of the procedures and all of the software all ready. So probably by the next year we were really in full swing.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think it's amazing what vision or goals you have in mind, and with all the people that you know around, and how all those connections and ideas come together.
It's amazing.
And boom, we have this running center.
I know. I tell people when they ask me, giving them career advice, and I say to them, if you could have the best job ever and forget about constraints, any constraints at all, just tell me what that is. And if you can visualize that, I really think that you can find those kinds of positions or create them. It takes some time. It takes patience, which a lot of us aren't very patient. It takes taking a risk. I left a tenure track position, and I'm not tenure track. There's no tenure in the medical school.
Is that right?
No, there's not.
Wow.
So for someone who's maybe earlier in their career, my kids were grown, so it's not like I had that risk, that worry. It was a time in my life where I could take a risk like that. So I think for me it was the right thing.
Yeah. Now at the running center, do runners come and use their health insurance to get the evaluation treatment? Or is it cash-based, or how does that work?
It's mixed.
It's a mix.
Yes.
Okay.
So our initial eval is 2.5 hours long. Right.
Wow.
So they get a force plate analysis, a treadmill analysis. We do a full postural analysis. We look at their shoes and their orthotics. We do a gait analysis. We have them run with shoes on, with shoes off, with minimal shoes. We then do a lower quarter kind of functional assessment. Then we sit down with them and we pull all of that together, and we develop our clinical hypothesis and tell them what a plan that we would recommend for them. That is self-pay because insurance would never pay for it.
I was going to say 2.5 hours of your time. That's
Yeah. And then after that, everything else, all the follow-ups are insurance.
I see.
Because it's kind of it's not standard PT. Our clinic resides under the umbrella of a larger outpatient clinic.
Okay.
So that we can take advantage of the overhead of, billing and insurance and all of that, scheduling. But we do things very different. So we see patients for an hour. So it's kind of a separate entity underneath the entire Spaulding National Running Center. But still, so we see them for an hour, and it's covered by insurance.
And then are other people covered under the research grant that you get? Are there like military people that you're working with, or?
Yeah, so the clinic is separate in terms of the personnel from the research lab, but having said that, it's a good question. Every patient that we see, we consider a research subject, even though they're not enrolled in a particular research project, because when they come in, we can use their data. It has to go through IRB. We don't have to get informed consent because we're using data that we would have collected anyways on them. We're not doing anything different, but we have to put that through IRB to make sure that we're using the data in an ethical way.
Just for my lack of research lingo,
IRB
stands
is the
for
Institutional Research Review Board. Sorry.
Okay.
So this is the board that reviews the research and decides, is the benefit worth the risk, and is it ethically done, that kind of thing. Yeah. So we have to get permission to use the data once we have it, but we have instrumented treadmill data on 700 runners so far, so we can ask a lot of questions, which makes it really nice. So they kind of do serve as research, but on the research side, that actually is just usually the subjects are separate. We recruit for different pathologies or different mechanics or different footwear groups, that kind of thing.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
that's great. Okay, now Irene, I know you're a big researcher. So what's the secret to getting huge grants from places like the NIH and other organizations?
Wow. Well, I think luck, there's a little bit of luck involved. I mean, it depends on whose hands the grant gets in. But before that, I think in terms of writing a good grant, you've got to be able to tell a story. You got to tell the story. I mean, when you're writing a paper, you tell a story. You have to give them really good justification for why this is the most important study in the world. And that's fun. I like writing that story. It's one of my favorite parts of writing in a grant, right? It's got to have good science, of course. It's got to be a relevant question. But I think you also have to be really persistent You have to have a thick skin. I've gotten numerous grants. I mean, my early career, I was like successful, and then I got bam, bam, slammed. So you just don't know when it's coming.
Okay.
It's gonna come.
Yeah.
It's a tough environment now, as people know. But I do think that one of the program officers once told me, Irene, you know who gets grants? People who write grants. So you have to just continue to be persistent. So you got to throw enough spaghetti on the wall and something will stick. So I think that's important. But I think luck, a little bit of luck, because you know, I've been in grant reviews, and it really depends on whose hands your grant gets in. And you don't have a lot of control over that. And so you just hope that they see it, that something sparks them, because they're the ones that decide, you know, they're going to support it or not. I had a grant that the first time I submitted it, it didn't get discussed. So not getting discussed means it's in the lower half of the grant. So they'll write a review for you, but they don't take the time in the study section to discuss it. So did not get discussed the first time. I submitted it again. They give you comments, you make your improvements, did not get discussed again. And then the third time, it was funded. So it went from a low, and then high score. So it doesn't make sense, because every time I got feedback, I tried to make it better, and I feel like I responded as best as I could. And I honestly think it's just that whoever's hands that grant got in, they got excited about it. It sparked their interest.
Okay.
So that's why I say there is a little bit of luck, but I don't think it's all luck. I think you have to write grants, and I think you have to write good science. I think it's good to have other people read your grants, so that, you know, especially someone who may be not really close to the topic, because sometimes sometimes the reviewers aren't very close to your topic. Maybe, and you might get an orthopedic surgeon, but you may know nothing about this particular topic. So I think it's important. Those are some sort of tips in terms of trying to increase your chances, so to speak.
My wife is a writer, so when you said that you know, it's a lot of it is storytelling.
Yes,
I think she's going to be thrilled to hear that.
Yes,
but it's true. Storytelling is so important, because sometimes data speaks for a lot of evidence, but it's the stories that people remember later on.
It's true. Yeah. It's so true. And it just makes it interesting, right? I mean, it's one thing to just go, this author said this, and this author said this, and this author said this, so this is why we're doing the study, as opposed to, you know, painting the picture of why this is really important and why this is exciting. And, you know, you have to provide the evidence in that introduction. Think about it as a funnel. And she might also think, I don't know if she writes scientifically. I don't know what kind of...
she's a young adult fantasy novel.
Wow. But she has to tell stories.
We're a big Harry Potter fan.
Oh, so there you go.
Yes.
So this is, it's a little bit different, because when you write, and it's the same with a grant, when you write an introduction, you start with a very wide, broad sweep about a big, so kind of general issue, and then you funnel it down. And I always say that by the time someone gets to the purpose and hypotheses, which is the end of your introduction, they should know what it is, because you've done a good job of kind of taking them down that path. You're thinking.
You painted that picture.
You painted the picture. Yeah.
That's really cool. So now you do all these things. How do you balance your time between your research, the clinical time with your patients, and your family?
I know, it's hard. And, you know, I get that question a lot, and maybe more from women that have got children that do still, I mean, men are so good now at being partners and all of this, and helping, and any spouses are really, I think it's more shared now, but I think that sometimes women feel more of that burden, and I think what you have to do is realize that you're asking a lot of yourself to have all these roles. And so you can't expect you're going to be 100% at all of the roles 100% of the time. This is the way I deal with it. So I say you've got your professional hat, right? And I consider that clinical and research.
That's right.
You have your family hat, right? And then you have your me hat, right? Which is probably the one you let go the most, right? Probably when you have something to let go, right?
So true.
Right. So that's like taking care of yourself and exercising and doing things that sort of nurture yourself back. So you just have to realize that there are times when you're going to be a little out of bounds. Like, there are times when my husband has to be really patient because I'm working on a grant. I mean, I'm lucky that he's very understanding. But then I have to make it up. It's like you withdraw from the bank and you got to deposit to the bank, right? And I'll say to him, not even taking my computer. We're going to go. We're going to have a good time. We're going to get away for the weekend. So I think that for me, that's what's worked really well, is being just being a little easier on yourself to realize you're not going to be doing everything. Because I think we all are overachievers in some sense.
And it just brought back some things I wanted to ask you from before. Doing research and seeing patients and then teaching.
Yes.
I think in the faculty at WashU, my professors were clinicians and educators, or were doing research, clinical stuff, and teaching us. So I felt like as a student, I benefited the reality of what they're seeing in the clinic, and then, getting that practical tips. As opposed to what I see happening in Japan is that physical therapy professors, they do not often have their faculty practice, or very few of them are actually seeing patients. And yet maybe 4 or 5 years out of school, they've become teachers. And so out of the 4 or 5 years of their clinical practice, they're teaching students about how to treat
and
patients.
They haven't really treated them, or you only have for a couple of years.
So I think it's that's one challenge that I find in some of the places where it's like, oh, I wish they were able to do a lot of these different aspects, because the whole picture as it fills into that education part.
I think you see that in the States as well, not just in Japan. I think what happens is when you look at what your metrics are in academia, it is service, teaching, and research. It's not clinic. Clinic is not part of it. And so, you're given percentages. You are 10% service and 30% teaching and 60% research, and that's how they judge your metrics. The problem with that is there's not a place for clinic, right? So it's really hard to fit that in some place. Now I just told them I wanted to do it, and I just made a clinical decision or a professional decision. I was just and it was only 4 to 6 hours a week in the clinic. But I think as clinical scientists, we should all be in the clinic for some period. Just like you have to, in your academic position, you have to teach. You are expected to research. I think a clinician should be expected to stay clinically active. I really do. I would advocate for that. Like WashU. WashU, I think, is one of the sort of models for that, really. But not all programs are that way. And I think it's really because of the demands of what you're being graded on when it comes to promotion and tenure.
I see. Yeah. So in front of my teachers, I can never say, "Oh, I'm busy," because I know all the things that they do. So, switching gears, what are some of concerns or maybe disappointments that you've encountered as a physical therapist?
That's a good question. I worry about the metrics that PTs have to live under. So, there are places where you see patients for 30 minutes, right? Regardless, it's how many patients have you met your metrics, as opposed to focusing on, can we get these patients better? I'm really fortunate to have an hour. Our PTs have an hour with each patient, but it's not like that in many outpatient centers.
That is true.
And so that, I think I worry about that the most, because you don't have time to think as much when you're like rushing from patient to patient. And a lot of times they're pushed off to a PT assistant or a PTA, a PT aide. And so I just feel like you're maybe not doing the best for the patient, and then they don't have a good experience, and then they start thinking. I've had patients that have come to me that said, I stopped going to PT because it wasn't helping, and it's just hard for me to. It wasn't making them worse. I just didn't feel like it was making them better. I just think that there may be something wrong there.
That's true. And sure, there are people who maybe even if they're given the environment, they may not be thinking through the problem. So they're just doing the whatever they've just the path of least resistance. But there are therapists who really want to think things through and figure it out. And yet that environment is not there. So it's really hard for them to,
Right. And that's what I worry about. I worry about our profession losing that, which is what I think is the value that we bring to the table, as being able to figure things out, to problem solve, and to help the patient learn to problem solve it themselves. It's hard to do that in 20s. You know, you talk about 30 minutes, you got to go down the hall and get the patient, bring them in, get them set up. You know what I'm saying? So it's probably not even 30 minutes in some cases.
That's true. Now, on the other hand, what gets you really excited about being a physical therapist?
I think it's helping people to reach their full potential, no matter what that is. And we heard a lot about that today. I mean, for me, it's not aerial acrobats and some of the things like pushing beyond what I think is our natural sort of physical limits and going way beyond that. But for those folks, that's their excitement. For me, it's just getting people whatever it is that their level that they're at. Even if they're in a wheelchair, if they were doing gait training with a prosthesis. It's getting them to their full potential. The closer to their potential, the happier I am.
Yeah.
So that's the part.
Now, what do you think are the ideal qualities that make an excellent physical therapist? Like, what qualities should they have?
Yeah, that's another good question. I think that you have to have a certain amount of confidence. You just do. You know, if you come in and you're like, I have no idea, even if you're not sure, you've got to exude confidence for the patient to be confident. You have to be approachable. I mean, you have to have good communication skills. A person should feel like they're really comfortable with you. I think you have to be empathetic. I think that's really important. And I don't mean sympathetic, I just mean empathetic, that you understand and you can feel what they're going through, because I think that helps them open up to you. And that's a big part of what we do, is building that relationship with the patient.
So true.
Right?
Yeah.
Approachable, I think that's probably most of it. I think you just have to be a good a sounding board for the patient. Education. You have to be a good teacher too, because we're kind of salespeople, right? You're selling an idea. So
yes,
yeah,
totally agree with all of those. Now this is a personal question because I'm approaching 40 years old soon, and I'm. What advice would you give to your 40-year-old self? And if you could just tell us what you were doing at the time and where you were. And
40, I have to say, for me, this is a loaded question for me, because 40 was probably one of my lowest points of my life.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, but it's good. It's good to ask this question, because I think, at the time I was going through a divorce.
I see.
And I was going to marriage counseling, trying to see if we can save this marriage. And then I was taking my kids to counseling, and I was also coming up for tenure. And it was probably really one of the most stressful periods of my life.
Yes.
And I think if I look back now, I would probably tell myself to breathe and that I'll get through it, because now I know I did, but so for me, it's probably a little bit different. If I weren't in that situation, I think back on that, I'd say to be bold. I think it's good to be bold. I think sometimes even at 40, you're a little bit, you're just a little bit, you don't feel like you have that confidence yet, I don't think. At least I didn't at the age of 40. So I think being bold and being willing to be a little bit disruptive in your thinking, that's how change happens. So I think from a professional standpoint, that's what I'd say. From a personal standpoint, I'd say have fun. Just don't forget to have fun, because it's such a big part of your life. It's not just work.
Yeah. Do you think being bold sort of helped you gain that confidence? Because, as a younger therapist, we're finding with some of the patients that we meet, inside we're thinking, I have no idea what's going on, or I'm feeling stuck. And yet if we show that outwardly, they're not going to be able to trust us, and then, there goes the quality of our treatment. But do you think being bold sort of, gives you a little bit extra confidence?
I think it does. And I think, I'm thinking the bold, I was thinking more of from a research standpoint, but I think it does translate to the clinic as well. I mean, you may want to try something that's a little bit different and off the beaten track with your patient, especially if you've kind of stuck. And so being bold might be, let's try some minimal shoes or something like that. Like, this isn't working, let's try something else with this patient. And I think what you have to do also is when you're in that situation, fall back on what you feel you know, right? Because the patient's not going to really know the difference, honestly. And then when the patient is gone, just get back and think about it, and go back to the research, go back to talking to your colleagues. I mean, use all of the resources.
Yeah.
I think being resourceful is another strength of a PT, right?
Yes.
So use all of your resources so that the next time the patient comes, so you can say, I've thought even more about this, and I'm thinking maybe we should try X.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, how about your ideal vision for the future of our profession?
Yeah, I think in one regard, I think it's really important that we become lifelong partners with patients, where patients, you not only see them when they're hurting, but that you get your teeth checked up every 6 months. You change your oil every 5,000 miles, right? I mean, we are a machine that we want to keep going for a very long time. So I would like to see insurance pay for things like a yearly checkup, a yearly annual checkup, just like you do with your physician. That physical body needs a checkup. You don't know what kind of injuries you've had in the meantime, or sickness, or being in bed, or whatever that could change the person and their physical makeup. So I would really like to see that.
And I think that's why we need that standardized exams that we've been discussing, that then what are we going to do with that annual checkup?
Right. So it gives you this sort of objective quality, or really qualitative and quantitative kind of measure that you can compare from the year before. It's standardized. It gives you a good starting point, which is what we're thinking about for this exam, from what I understand.
Yes. What are your current big projects?
Big projects.
Yes.
So we have, if I think about the grants, that's one of the things that we're working on. We have a study that's funded by the NBA, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basketball is not an area I have studied a lot, but one of my very first.
They wear shoes for those.
I do. But I have to tell you a funny story about that.
Okay.
So I have a basketball player who was practicing barefoot on the court. Absolutely.
Really?
Yes.
I'd never heard of that.
Yeah, you can find him on YouTube. I'll tell you the story in a minute.
Oh,
but
great.
So basketball is, one of my very first studies with Peter Kavanaugh was we went around the country to 5 or 6 national basketball teams, right? And we assessed them. We did 2D video, and we did ground reaction forces with them doing different kinds of activities that were germane to basketball.
Yes.
I even tested Michael Jordan. That's my claim to fame. He's a very famous basketball player. So there were 2 papers. One was on kinetics or forces in basketball, and one was in kinematics. Now, that was a long time ago. I look back at those papers and I read it and I go, oh my gosh, I wrote that. But so it's funny that it's come back to this, but it is very similar to running in that running is a series of single leg landings, and basketball is a lot of landings, and there's different activities in basketball, the cuts and the turns and things like that, but we're looking at impacts like we have in running. We're using those little accelerometers,
the IMUs,
around their ankles,
Okay.
and we're going to be looking at how impacts change over the course of a game, over the course of a season. We're very interested in fatigue and how that affects it. And the focus of it is the outcome are bone stress injuries, particularly the metatarsals, because that's the most common place.
Okay.
So we're going to be taking microarchitectural measures of the bone through HRPQ-CT, that's high resolution peripheral quantitative CT. So it gets you much more granular data of the bone. So we're looking at that. We're looking at DEXA at baseline.
Sure, okay.
We're looking at diet. We're looking at sleep. So all of that over the course. Now, these are not professional basketball. These are collegiate basketball teams that we're looking at. We're looking at 2. So it's not a huge study, but there's a lot of data, and we're monitoring them over the entire season. So there's going to be a lot of data there.
Yes.
So, and again, it's more about, it's in line with a lot of what I've done when I look at impacts and injuries. So it's going to be really fun to be looking at a different sport.
That's great.
So that's one. We have another stress fracture grant looking at women who've had stress fractures. We are part of a larger grant that is looking at many physiological measures. Again, HRPQCT, blood, some other measures like that. But we're looking at, again, impacts and looking at women that have had no stress fractures, 1 or 3 or more, with the idea that the first one, if you only have one, maybe it really isn't related to mechanics. It's sort of a one-off, you did too much too quick too soon. But when you've had 3 of them, then you start to think maybe there's some mechanical issues.
Sure,
so we're looking at that, and we're also looking at runs to fatigue in that particular study.
Wow.
So those are the studies that we have going. We've I just submitted a grant looking at utilizing minimal footwear in midlife adults. And some of the effects of that. I don't want to talk too much about it because it's just a grant we submitted.
I see. Okay.
But and then we have another grant we're submitting to study military, about 1,000 recruits in the military. A big study. It's part of another larger study that's studying 4,000 of the recruits.
Okay.
So and looking at impacts and injuries and those kinds of things. So those are kind of some of the things that we have going. We also have a very large database that we keep adding to that has different, and it's all habitual states. So rear foot strikers, mid foot strikers, forefoot strikers, minimal shoes, people who run in hokas, people who run barefoot, all of the different footwears.
Yep.
And that serves as a great database for some of the medical residents that come through that do research. So we have a lot of those kinds of things going on too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Real quick, the stress fracture study, is that in the, where is the stress fracture?
Lower extremity, so it could be any. So
okay.
it could be, sacrum, femur. I mean, the tibia and the metatarsals are the most common in runners, and these are runners.
Yes. I went through, even though I don't look like it, I did play 4 years of basketball in college.
You did?
just accidentally. And we are basically, I did go through my first year of college, just went from tennis to not really doing any preparation for basketball.
And
right into basketball, change of surface, change of movements, got stress fracture in my tibia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so my first winter in Iowa, I was crutching through the ice.
Oh my gosh. And a boot probably. No, you wouldn't be a boot with a tibia.
It was, Yeah.
So, they're not fun. You don't want to get another one when you had one.
But I wish I knew back then what I know now of all of the physical stress. The dosage, the preparation, the training. I knew I was like the worst case scenario of like how not to be an athlete.
Right. So I could ask you, what would you tell your 22-year-old self right now that you know?
Yes, and I think the preseason preparation, just learning how to, move your body. I never thought about how I was squatting. And,
yes, I know.
Those are just the basic things that I think the youth athletes need to know.
Yeah. Do you think that that if we didn't have, I don't know, the sitting and all of that, like I really wonder about whether youth would actually develop natural squatting. As I mentioned in my talk, squatting is one of the most natural things that we do. So would we have these problems if people didn't sit so much and did more squatting out when, in the community, those kinds of things? I just wonder about that. Like, would we have needed to remediate some of these things if we had let them develop the way they were supposed to develop? That's kind of the premise of my work in running. Yeah.
Really good question.
Yeah. I don't know.
Well, I'll definitely be looking out for that stress fracture study then.
Yeah.
Okay, Irene. So going on to a little bit more fun question. This one might stump you, but it said that you are the average of 5 people that you surround yourself with. So who are the 5 people, or it could be groups of people that's influenced you the most?
Like influenced me the most now, or influenced me the most throughout my life?
It could be now or throughout. I think who are some of your important people? Yeah.
I find that a really hard question, just because if I think about my family,
yes,
I think every one of them in their own way has influenced me in a very big way. Both my mom, my dad, my children, and now my grandchildren, my husband.
Yes.
So it's hard for me to pick. I don't know that I don't know that I can really pick one person out. I think groups are easier for me to think
That's
about.
fine. That's fine. Yeah.
So,
I'm not asking you to pick your favorite child. Or
no,
anything like that.
I know, but I'm just it would be hard for me to say this one influenced me more than the other. So I mean, family in general, and probably the number one.
Yes.
I mean, when I leave this world, the most important thing is someone said she was a good mom, she was a good wife, she was, that to me is more important than she made these contributions to science, right? So I have to say family is definitely that. I have some friends, I grew up in a very, very small town, and we went to kindergarten through 12th grade together, and basically they're like my roots, they kind of keep me honest, and I still they're near Boston, they're about an hour outside of Boston. Okay. So I'm connected with them, and they have a big influence on me just because it helps me to remember my roots, and I love that. So I think that's another group that I would say. I'd say my current research group in terms of professionally, because it's the brainstorming. I was talking about the brainstorming before. I love sitting down, and I love their ideas, and we I'll come in thinking one thing in the meeting, and by the time I'm done, they've convinced me of something else. So I think that's really important. And then I think colleagues, some of my professional colleagues, I mentioned Mary Rogers to you before, and Jill McNick-Ray. They're two women who I did my PhD with, and we have stayed and remained friends all the way through this to now. I mean, we've vacationed together. We always room together at meetings, and have been that emotional support for each other through. I mean, we grew up in a society. Biomechanics was really primarily male dominated when we came in.
Yes,
it's now about half and half. But just having that support system has been really, and has had a big influence on me.
Great.
So yeah, I think it's those groups of people that have really influenced me.
Fantastic. Do you have a favorite motto?
I think my favorite motto is "Why not?"
Why not? Okay.
Yeah, wow. I think it's keeping your mind open to possibilities. Whether you're out doing something with people and friends, or whether it's something research. I mean, certainly you have to think about that. It's not going to do everything, but I think why not?
Yeah. I think
Simple.
that speaks with your bold statement.
Yeah,
too.
yeah, I think it does. Yeah,
Yeah. Do you have a morning routine? Like, what does the first 60 to 90 minutes of your morning look like?
Do you have one?
I do.
I think I do too. I think I do. So I get up in the morning, and the first thing I do, I hate to admit this, but I look at my phone. And I look at my phone, and I usually, before I even get out of bed, I look at the news. I just want to know what the news is before I get up. That's my first thing.
Yes.
Then I get up. I usually get up about 6:30, and I jump in the shower. And my husband, who knows me very well, makes my coffee and brings it into the bathroom.
No,
on time.
really?
He's a saint. He's awesome.
Wow.
It's because I need my coffee. I mean, I would take it intravenously if I could. I need that coffee in the morning.
Okay.
So I'll usually have my coffee, and then I like to. I usually have a piece of toast. I usually eat a very light breakfast, but I like to get through my emails before I get to work. So when I get to work, I can hit the ground running. So I do all my emails, and then I either walk to work or I take the bus, or if it's really bad weather, I'll drive. So I'm about 2.5 miles from work.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
that's so nice.
Yeah, so that covers probably the first couple of hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's pretty routine.
Well, then I'll know to email you in the morning.
That's right, because I will respond in the morning, first thing.
Very good, very good. It's good to know these habit of people,
exactly.
Right? Yes. How about some books that you've enjoyed the most?
Yeah.
And this could be fiction or nonfiction, whatever you like, reading.
Right. I like sometimes, I like to just immerse myself into a fictional book that just takes me away.
Yeah.
Right? And it a lot of times a mystery. I like things that have to do with the ocean. I grew up on the ocean. So when it comes to fiction, that's really what I like to just kind of forget about it. And the problem with me reading is I have to read it from cover to cover. I cannot read a book and put it down. I'm not one of those people that reads it, puts it down, reads it, puts it down. Especially fiction. Nonfiction, I can do that. So when I know that I'm going to read a book, I have to have the time. I can't do it. I can't do it when I'm like busy at work, or I can't read it at night. Nonfiction books. Spark is one of my favorites.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of that book? It's a great book.
Okay.
It's by John Rattay, and it's about how beneficial exercise is to the brain. And it's interesting because he talks about this. I wish I could remember the name of it. It's a very primitive organism. It's in the water, and it has a brain when it first starts out, right? And within the first 24 hours, it has to attach itself to a rock. Right?
Oh, okay.
So it attaches itself to a rock, and then its brain dissolves. I think it dissolves, or it eats its brain. I can't remember, but so what's so fascinating about that is that they had the brain. They needed the brain for movement, and once they stopped moving, they didn't need the brain. Like, I think that's fascinating.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, I think about the brain. The brain is really, really important for movement. It's important for thinking, of course, but really important for movement. And so this book talks about how the exercise is really powerful when it comes to kids. They talk about studies where they've taken kids who are really doing poorly academically, and they start to institute an exercise program for them. They'll come in early, some of these underprivileged kids, and their grades go way up. I believe so much that exercise is really, more powerful than medicine. And I'm vice president at ACSM, which is the American College of Sports Medicine, and exercise as medicine is a very big part of what we talk about, and how we need to be replacing, hopefully, some of these medications that we're giving people with exercise. So Spark kind of speaks to that, and there's a lot of different threads through it that just kind of have that same theme.
Well, just from that creature, I want to start reading this book.
He starts out talking about this little small organism. Yeah.
Great. Now, this may be a no-brainer, but what are your favorite exercises for your fitness?
I don't think it's a no-brainer because, you might think it's running. Yeah. And I really like to mix it up, right? Okay. So, and I've never been like a marathon runner. The longest I've run is 10 miles. So 4 miles is like a good distance for me, a couple times a week kind of thing. I like to be on the ocean, so I love to ocean kayak.
Oh, okay. Wow.
I love to bike. I've biked all around Europe for like 9 weeks.
Oh, so I bet that was beautiful.
It was awesome. Wow. So I love being on a bike. I like being on inline skates. So I really like to mix it up.
Yes. That's probably good that you're doing all variety of movements instead of just the one same,
we talked about that.
Things. Yes.
We talked about that this weekend.
Variety is good. So.
Yeah, just because of loading.
Yep. So, speaking of running, what shoes do you wear for your own running? Or are you really going barefoot? Because Boston gets cold, so you have to have at least something for protection.
Yes, and as I mentioned, when I was at Delaware, I actually started wearing minimal shoes in the wintertime. So yes. In the summertime, I love to be barefoot.
I see.
I love to run barefoot. It feels so good. And people say, well, don't you cut your feet, or doesn't it hurt you to step on a rock? And what happens when you step on a rock is that as soon as you hit it, you withdraw.
That's true. I find myself doing that too.
You withdraw. If you're not paying attention and you're really distracted, you can. I mean, I know people have cut their feet. I've never cut my foot. Boston has the cobblestone streets that are kind of brick-like, and they get really warm in the summer and smooth, and they really feel good. I love them. Yes. In terms of shoes, though, I wear a pair of Teva Nilches. They are $50 pair of water shoes. Teva doesn't make them anymore, unfortunately. So when they wear out,
I was going to look it up, but
no, they don't. But I mean, a shoe that I have a couple of them. I have the 5 fingers, because those were the first that I ran in for minimal. I've got the Merrill foot gloves, which are basically just a minimal shoe. They don't have the fingers. And the Tevas. I like the Tevas the best. They don't have any laces. They just slip on. They've got a rubberized kind of, the bottom of them are kind of rubberized. There's a little mesh top to it. And you can wear them in the snow and the cold.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I'm not a big snow runner, but I mean, when it's cold out or if there's a little bit of wetness on the ground, you think your feet stay dry.
Yeah.
So
I actually brought my.
You did.
I know. Would you
right.
mind? Because
No.
these are you wouldn't believe where I found these. I guess the brand name is called Fit Kicks. I was in Japan. I was in Kanazawa, and there's this gorgeous museum there. I went to the museum shop. We were just walking around, and I found these. And this was a few months
in
after.
a museum shop.
Yes,
wow.
I know. It's just odd. But I looked at these, and I immediately thought about you. And it was probably a few months after we've had the last retreat. So I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna start trying to just.
Walk,
they're
just
pretty,
walk.
Yeah. So
these are. So if you can do this with your shoe, and I'll show the audience here. If you can do this with your shoe, it's a minimal shoe.
Yeah.
So it's a shoe that gives you some protection from the bottom of your foot, right, from the elements. If you're doing trails and stuff, you're not going to want to be barefoot. I do know people that run barefoot, but it's hard. It can protect you from the elements, and it has something to keep the shoe on your foot. So this upper.
Yeah.
These are great.
Yeah.
They're perfect.
And you know what? They were like $30.
Yes, exactly. I tell people, you can buy the minimal shoes that are designed for running, but I mean the shoes that I'm running in are water shoes, and they cost me $50. So you can be very creative, right? Especially moms who ask me about kids. Do they make these for kids?
You know what? I'm not sure. I think I only saw the adult size.
Yeah, I might have to look them up because parents don't want to spend $100 on a pair of shoes where the kids are growing, right?
Yes.
So I tell my my parents, go to Walmart, go to Kmart, get the cheapest pair of Keds type sneakers because that's going to be the same thing. I mean, it's basically a surface to protect the bottom of your foot and give you some traction and something to keep it on the top. Right. So Fit Kicks, I'm going to have to remember that.
Yeah, it's a little bit slippery on the inside.
It is.
It is. So I have to have like a grippy sock. My 5-toe socks.
Do they work
inside?
Yeah,
and I think they work better.
I agree with you. That feels very slippy. Yeah, I can see how that would be because if you're running, it could.
Right.
Yeah. So did you start out walking in them?
So I have. I started walking in them, and it's interesting. My wife told me, why are you walking like that? Because we were taking a walk and I had these on, and she noticed that I'm a lot more bouncier, and it's very interesting. It's hard for me to do heel strike with these on, and I know you said in your lecture we should be heel striking when we're walking. Yeah. And because I had the mindset, okay, I'm going minimal shoes, working towards minimal shoe running and going for the force. So I kind of was like, no, and it's really hard for me to go heel strike.
Do you know why I think that is? Because you don't really have any cushioning here, right? In most shoes you have cushioning so you can kind of hit hard.
That's right, yeah.
So I think, and we're starting to study this now, I think that if you habitually walk in minimal shoes, that my hypothesis that you will take shorter steps. I know when I've walked with my husband and I had minimal shoes on, I've walked with him many times. My cadence, I was turning over much quicker.
I think that's part of that more bouncy kind of feeling too.
So you probably are still heel striking. You're just not heel striking with the same angle. Would be my guess. Okay. Is that you're probably like this.
Yeah, and I haven't videoed how.
Yeah, you don't want to be on the ball of your foot.
Yeah.
But you see, you have wear here.
Okay.
So I would guess that you're heel striking. Looking at, they're not super worn, but
yeah. Well, thanks for the quick assessment.
Sure.
Sorry to make your hands dirty.
No.
Okay. All right. And let's see, just the last few questions. You've traveled around the world. It could be for leisure or to teach about the human movement system, but where has been your favorite city you've visited, and where would you like to go next that you've never been before?
All right. Good question. I think my favorite city outside the United States, and I've been there many, many times, is the town that we go to on the Amalfi Coast. So this is leisure. This is not work.
Where's the Amalfi Coast?
So it's south of Naples.
Okay.
It's a kind of cove-like shape to it. And it's bookended by two towns, Positano and Amalfi. and there's a little town in the middle that I love to go to, and it's only got 2,000 residents. It's real Italy. I feel like I get immersed.
Sounds so relaxing.
It's mountains down to the ocean.
Oh wow.
Oh, and you do thousands of steps a day. This is why I love it, because you don't have to go to the gym. You are doing so. I may come home with buns of steel. I really feel like my glutes are my butt's stronger. It's amazing. So I want to spend a lot. I'd like to spend a couple of months there at some point. But so I think it's one of my favorite spots in the whole world. I love it. Where have I not been? I love Italy, and I'd like to go to Sicily and see Sicily. I've seen on some of the travel shows some of the little towns and some of the little, just some little stores and stuff, the restaurants, and that's the place I'd like to go. So Sicily is one. And then I've been to Hawaii, but my bucket list, have you ever heard of the Stairway to Heaven?
No, so in Hawaii?
Yes, you have to look it up.
Okay,
look it up.
I definitely
You have to look up Stairway to Heaven.
Okay.
Because it is this amazing stairway that goes up this mountain, and it's actually not very safe. It's closed because there's some places where it's a little rickety.
Okay.
Right? But it's people still they're renegades that sneak on. They come in the middle of the night, and there are guards there that sometimes look the other way from what I can tell from the blogs, but people do sneak on, right? And it is the most amazing journey and amazing view, and I don't want to jump out of an airplane. I have no desire to do that. I would like to walk the Stairway to Heaven. So that's in Oahu.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if it'll ever happen. It is closed. I don't know if they'll ever open it. I don't know if I'm gonna have to do it illegally. Hopefully no one's listening on here. They'll be watching for me. But
well, good luck, and if you do, please be safe.
I will, and I'll send you pictures.
Awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
I'll FaceTime you.
Now, any guilty pleasures? Like, are there TV shows that you like to watch, or movies, or things like that?
Yeah, I'm a big Rocco. I love romantic comedies. Yeah, I just saw Stars Born. I loved it, the new one. So I really enjoyed that.
Tears.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. But I like some of the House Hunters International, where they look at homes all over the world, that kind of thing. Friends, I'm a big Friends fan. My husband and I watch it. I've seen them probably a bazillion times. Kind of mindless. I'm not really a big TV person. Like, I don't really follow. You know, some people are like, did you watch this Netflix? Did you watch this?
It's gotta be hard for you with all you do.
Yeah, I would rather do something else. But there are some times when you just want to sit on the couch, get under the blanket, and passively be entertained. And those are the times I turn on Friends or House Hunters.
Friends
or whatever.
is a good one.
Friends, yeah.
And any type of music that you enjoy?
What do you like?
I like I like all sorts of music. But I like people like Jason Mraz, Jack Johnson, Ed Sheeran, Justin Timberlake. I think
you do.
Yeah, I do. I would love to see him in concert.
Oh wow!
But then when I'm studying or reading something or trying to translate something, I like to put jazz or light electronics, something that just kind of there's a nice little beat to it, so I can focus.
So I like Southern rock.
Oh,
I'm a rock girl. I love rock.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Southern rock and classic rock, and I love country. So I do the country music.
Yes.
I
do like Taylor Swift, although she's more pop.
Yeah, she's kind of pop. Yeah. I really, if I need to, I'm one of those people that likes quiet when I'm trying to concentrate. Like, I can't have the TV on in the background. If my husband's here, I have to go in the bedroom or something.
Okay.
But I like Spanish guitar in the background. Just, quiet kind of. Maybe some Jim Brickman piano. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yes, that's on my heavy rotation.
Yeah, I love him. So, so some of that I like.
Very nice. And where can people find you on the internet, social media, or to maybe find out where your next course is and things like that?
Yeah, so I don't have Instagram. There's only so many things you can keep up with. I don't know how people do it. It's those millennials, they're used to all that stuff. But so I do have a Twitter account, and that's at Irene S. Davis.
Okay.
And so that's probably the best way to keep up with me.
Awesome.
And I often will announce the courses that we're doing. So
Okay.
Chris Bryan and I are doing a course again in Johns Hopkins at the end of this month.
Oh, very
so
good.
that's coming
Okay.
up.
Okay.
We have a course at Harvard Medical School. We have a sports course
Oh,
that I'll be speaking at that covers sports medicine from the head to the toe. And then I'm doing a post-conference 2-day course on running, day and a half course on running. And we're focusing on foot and ankle.
Very
so those
good.
are some of the things that are coming up.
Yeah, that's great. So follow Dr. Irene Davis on Twitter. And oh my gosh, Irene, thank you so much for your time.
You know what? I'm honored that you wanted to speak to me. So thank you. It was
Yes.
really fun.
Yes, and we'll see you next year.
And we'll be seat makes again next year. How's that?
All right. Thanks so much.
Yep. Take care. Thanks.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.